What's up, Core? We're stoked you guys chose to do a night of worship and that you're doing the Job song, and we're really excited to be a part of it. That's really cool, so just want to thank you guys for that. We just want to share a little bit about how we wrote the Job song, why we wrote the Job song, what we were going through personally when we wrote it, and it's a pretty cool story because I was actually sitting under Scott Treadway during the Job series, and he was talking about Job struggling, and these thoughts were just coming to my mind, and I just got out my iPhone like you're not supposed to do in church, although half of you probably have yours out right now, and I just began to write these lyrics, and this song was really born out of that moment. What about for you?
Yeah, kind of my story behind the Job song is, it's interesting because we were both in a season where we were going through different seasons of grieving separately, but it was like melting together, which was kind of weird, and I guess God ordained. But my season of Job song is I was writing in my journal, and we had just gone through our first miscarriage, and it was just a really dry season for me where I think it was the first time that I ever allowed myself as a Christian girl to be angry with God. And I was scared, you know, because God is sovereign, and we learned that God is in control and that He loves us and that He knows what's best for us. And yet I couldn't shake this feeling of just anger and resentment and bitterness, because I knew that the only reason I had lost a baby or that I couldn't get pregnant was because of Him ultimately. So I had this thing called the Ugly Journal, and I just wrote, and I wrote everything that I felt, everything that I was going through, everything that I was grieving through. And one day I was crying on the bed, and Tyson asked if he could read my journal. And I was kind of nervous because it wasn't pretty, and it was ugly, and it was weird, you know, to have to expose myself to my husband in that way. But he wrote it, and then he sat through Scott's message, and then out of that kind of came this song of it's okay to become undone before your God. It's okay to be angry at the Lord and to tell Him what you're feeling, but ultimately you have to look at your life and your situation in every season, the good and the bad, and be able to stand up and say, but no matter what I'm feeling, no matter what I'm going through, I'm still gonna bring you praise. I'm still gonna lift my hands and bow my heart, because you are the God of the universe, and I'm submitting myself, sometimes reluctantly, to what you have in store for us.
Yeah, and I think, you know, I was sitting there in this message with Scott, and he said this line, and I have to give him credit for this line. It's probably one of the best lines in the entire song. But he was talking about suffering and losing and loss in this life and broken relationships. And he said this phrase, he says, that God may become reward enough. And that stuck in my head like crazy, just like echoed in my ears, and I wrote it down, and that's kind of what the song was written out of. And we wanted to write a song that was different. We wanted to show that it's okay to suffer, and it's even possible to suffer well. I think of Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. You know, he's praying to God, and you guys know the story with, you know, stress, so much stress that the blood capillaries in his head burst, and he's dripping blood, sweating blood from his head, and he prays to God. He says, if there's any other way that man can be saved, let this cup pass from me. And then he ended with this. He said, nevertheless, not my will, but your will be done. And so we see Jesus, the great suffering servant who suffered well, who God, his own Father, answered his prayer with the answer, no, there is no other way that man can be saved. It's the cross. You have to endure the cross. I love what Hebrews 12 says, that he endured that suffering. He scorned it, but he endured it for the hope of what was coming, which was the church. And so we've always known, one of our favorite verses is 2 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 5, that says that God of all comfort comforts us, that we might comfort one another with that comfort we've received. And so we've always known that our purpose in the church was to bless other people, even if it meant going through suffering for that sake. And so we wanted to write a song that talked about suffering, because we felt like the church didn't have a lot of those songs. And so we sat down and wrote this from specifically Job 15. verse 13. Here Job is making his argument to God, and in the middle of it, he's pleading with God to end his suffering, but in the middle of it he says, though you slay me, I will trust in you. And it was just like, again, just echoing in my head, and I'm like, I've got to write this down, and I've got to put a melody to it. And that was how this song was born, coupled with everything that we were going through, surrounded by other dear Christians who had suffered, and then just pen to paper with melody, and then that bridge was born with hearts bowed low and hands held high. We bless the name of our great God. And I think this song has done so much for us, and we just hope that it really just takes you guys into the heart of God tonight.